Welcome to the Her Voice Shines podcast, where we celebrate the power, brilliance, and resilience of women everywhere. I'm your host, Shanadra Washington. Join us as we share inspiring stories and insights from extraordinary women who have found their voice and are making a difference. Together, we'll create a ripple effect, illuminating the path to visibility and empowerment. Let's break barriers, shatter ceilings, and lift each other up. In each episode, we dive deep into the journeys of women who have turned their challenges into triumphs and their dreams into reality. Whether you're looking for motivation, guidance, or a community that understands your journey, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and remember, let your voice shine. Let your voice shine. You have landed at the Her Voice Shines podcast. I'm your fabulous host, Shanadra Washington, streaming from the real high. It's like 80 degrees today in Christmas time here in Houston, Texas. Like, where is the Christmas weather? But I'm not going to complain because I really don't like cold weather like that. But let me just tell you guys, whenever you see this, just know that we had a very warm Christmas season here in Houston, Texas. I am so happy to be back in the studio yesterday. We did some amazing things on the ground. I was able to take Her Voice Shines to the ground yesterday. We had 7 interactions like in a shopping center. I can't wait for you guys to see that when those drop. But guess what we're here for? Our exciting woman. I'm not going to tell you her name or anything about her. I'll let her do that because she's going to come to the stage and do our normal drill, which is tell us her name, where she's streaming from, and we get the magic of her story. Without any further waiting time, here's my very beautiful guest for today.
All righty. I am absolutely honored to be here, Shanadra. Thank you so much. And what's my name? I'm Martha Burich. And what's my story? Well, as you can see, I wrote the book, Yes, You Can Raise Happy, Responsible Children, endorsed by Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul himself. But we'll get into that in a minute. You know, I want to start with, what is my story? Well, I was an unwanted child. That's the very beginning. And my mother was a good mother and she loved me, but I was the third child, and I had 2 older brothers. When my mother realized she was pregnant with me, she was thinking, how am I going to feed her? I can't feed the other 2 because our father drank and gambled all the money away. So my mother was very stressed, and she told me I was a very, very good baby. And I think I sensed, I hope I don't start crying. I think I sensed her stress and her concern. So, and I was very insecurely attached. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was 15, Mom and I went shopping and I lost her. I lost her in the department store. I started screaming, Mom, Mom. Oh, she was so mad at me. Oh, goodness. She was, what are you yelling about? Well, I lost you. I lost you. I didn't know where you were. But that just reflected my insecure attachment. And I always had this belief that everybody loved my brothers better. And I did come from an Italian family where the boys were more appreciated than the girls back then at that time. And also I had a stepmother when I think I was about 5 or 6. My parents divorced, and my mother was a lovely woman, but my stepmother was a terrible alcoholic, and she was very difficult to deal with. And I'll tell you, I was about 6 years old visiting with my dad, and he would work, and then she would watch us. And I think she didn't appreciate it. She had 2 daughters of her own who said that she didn't like them, but she didn't have custody. Their father kept them away from her. They found her so toxic. Anyway, she was really mad at me one day. And so I went to bed and pretended to sleep. And my dad came home and she was just screaming about me, just Martha this and Martha that. And my dad said, for God's sakes, Kathleen, she's 6 years old. What could she have possibly done? But that's pretty much what I had to deal with. And, being a child, you take all that in. So I had a lot of that to overcome as I grew up. And I was very, very shy, very afraid of people. But I still had goals, and my mother was such a good role model. And, she really taught me that you can't quit. You can't quit no matter what. So I had to work through everything really, really, really difficult. I was kicked out of 2 colleges. I was a pain. And one day I was crying to my mother, what am I going to do? I was kicked out of these. My future's ruined. And she said, that's ridiculous. You're 20 years old, 19 years old, whatever I was. She said, you march right back to that college and you ask them to let you back in and you say you're going to behave, and you do. And that's exactly what I did. And they said, okay, 6 months probation, don't make less than a C, and you better behave. And you know what? That's exactly the consequence I needed to grow up and realize, you know what? Yes, I do need to straighten up. And life isn't fun and games, and it's not a party. It's time to get serious. And because of that, I turned things around. It took a long time for me to change and stop being so insecure and shy. But here I am today. And I pretty much, after the age of retirement, I grew up, I became my goals. I became a college professor, which was my dream. I became a high school science and math teacher, which was my dream, and special education. So, I got to live my dreams. I'm married. I married a very nice man. We had a lovely child. And now in retirement, I've written the book and I'm talking about the book and I'm helping people. I volunteer weekly at the jail and the treatment center to help addicts and alcoholics because I know that they need somebody on their side. And a lot of people don't understand that, you know what, we don't help by judging. We help by understanding. And that's pretty much my story. That's where I am at this time. I also have two rescue dogs. And it's really interesting, the parallels between teaching your dog to behave and getting your children to behave. I have a lot of dog stories too. And that's where I'm at.
Miss Martha, I was coming, trust me. Look, my mouth got a little tricky. I say, I'm here, don't you leave, Miss Martha, because that was an introduction. That was a really great insight to a little bit about your journey and then kind of who we see sitting here. But one of the things, what stood out to me, you said, I was an unwanted child. That's what you felt to be, right? And that's heavy. I mean, you say it very lightly because you evolved, but that's a very heavy thing to say. So
Yeah.
I want you to tell me, how did that belief kind of quietly shape your choices? Because one of the things I think about, because a lot of people ask me about certain things, and I kind of can tie it directly back to a moment in childhood. I can tie it directly back to an experience that I've had. Tell me about that
Mm.
feeling of like being unwanted. How did that quietly start to shape your choices before you really even knew what that meant?
That's really good question. And and talking about the insecure attachment because of that, I remember it being, I don't know, I think I was two. My mother had gone next door to talk to a neighbor, and I looked around and saw that she was gone. I ran out of the house looking for her. It was like 8 o'clock at night. Just things like that, being so concerned. Where are other people? um, am I annoying people? And I was so reticent and afraid to step up and to say what I really thought, and always thought that I had to stay in the background and that I was of no consequence and had no value and importance. So that definitely flavored a lot of my life, especially in the early days. I was afraid of everything and everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean it's always interesting to look back because you'll see those behaviors show up, and you're like, I'm an adult, and you're trying to figure out where it comes from. A lot of it stems back to kind of those first feelings of insecurity, or maybe sometimes it could be on the other side, grand or whatever it is. But I look back, and I sometimes get myself into a certain place, and I think back, and a lot of it is rooted back to those very early experiences. That's why I tell people it's good to take that journey with yourself to see where some of these feelings are derived from. So I wanted to make
Mhm.
sure that I said that because I know that there are people I've come in contact with who have felt unwanted, even by parents. So I want to thank
Mhm.
you for sharing that. What I do like about your story, you said, look, I went and got this master's degree. And the master's degree, of course, they give you the credential, right? Tell me what
Mhm.
they represented beyond the credential, because I think for you, like, yes, I have, this degree, but for you, going through your journey, this probably represented a lot more than just what was on paper.
Oh, well, all my life I was always told, I have two older brothers. My oldest brother, oh, he's a genius, and he really is. He's a mechanical genius. He built his own television, I think a robot when he was 10, built a television when he was 16, and took a car apart and put it back together. He really is and still is a mechanical genius. And my other brother was very, very creative. Well, what was I? Chopped liver? And that's pretty much how I felt. No matter what I did, it was never good enough. And so I always thought that I wasn't very smart. I wasn't very talented. I wasn't creative. So that always flavored me too. So that no matter what I did, to me, it was never good enough. No matter what I did, it was never good enough. So that always flavored me. And then I had to really, that's something that has kind of stuck with me for years and years and years, all through really through my adult life. It's only until I don't know, after I taught a lot and started realizing that I was, doing a lot of good lessons and the children enjoyed my lessons, and other teachers would come to me and say, how is it that you get the kids to behave and take notes? And so I started realizing that, wait a minute, I am doing some things right, and I'm not a total loser and idiot the way that I've pretty much believed for a long time. So yeah, but I had to keep stepping up to the plate, and I had to keep forcing myself to, what, that I don't know if that's true or not, but this is what I want to do in my life, and I've got to keep stepping up and keep working, and I can't give up. And that's number one, Shanadra. Do not quit. If you want something, do not quit. I flunked German. Oh, my German teacher was so mad at me in college. That was one of the reasons I dropped out and got kicked out. I just couldn't get German. I just couldn't get it. And I wanted to be the next Sigmund Freud. So I thought my life was over when I flunked German, because I thought, oh my goodness, I'll never be a therapist. Oh my goodness. I can laugh about it now, but oh, it was a big deal at the time.
Sure. That's great. But no, seriously, thank you for the nugget of not quitting, because I have to be quite honest with you, Miss Martha, because here lately it's just been so many different moving parts and competing priorities, and like me even walking in purpose and getting up and doing. I'm like, I just want to quit. And I say that, in a place, to where you're like, this is just like, not any, despair without any hope type thing. But it's just like, I'm tired. I've tried this thing, tried that thing, but you really get into this position to where you're like, I'm done. I just, enough is enough. And that little nugget really helped me. It's small though, but when you hear it and the real time struggles that you're having trying to keep everything together, just that little whisper of don't quit is really, really powerful. So thank you for that nugget. I know it may seem very simple, but for me, I tell people all the time, this podcast is like reciprocity for me, because most of my guests, like, they come right on time. They come right on time to deposit messages and fresh perspectives that I really need in the moment. So I don't take this place lightly. People know that I love it here. Let me ask you this about sobriety, because you said, you got to sobriety. You said it requires a radical honesty. I was like, dang, like radical. It's like honesty, then it's radical honesty. That's like, woof, because you have to be radical with it. Tell me, what was the hardest truth you had to face? Because in that radical honesty, it's when that mirror turns around and there's truth that you have to face in the process of radical honesty. So what was that hardest truth?
Boy, that's a really deep question, and it's a process. It's really a process. And Jack Canfield, that wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, he never had an alcohol problem, but all his life he went through different, I don't know, workshops and therapies and whatnot. And he took a therapy about 3 or 4 years ago. So he's like 80 now. So maybe when he was 76, 77, and he remembered something about himself when he was 9 that had been kind of affecting him all his life, that had been something in the background that had dictated some of his choices and things. So, the whole thing about, you're never going to totally self-discover yourself. That's, as long as you're alive, you'll learn something new if you allow yourself to. And sometimes some people can't face the truth about themselves. The truth is we aren't always honest. We aren't always truthful. We aren't always dependable. We aren't always these perfect people. Why not? Because we're not robots. We're humans who are dealing with our own emotions and feelings and our own ways of handling things. And until we get better information and learn how to use it, we keep repeating a lot of the same old patterns. So yes, facing ourselves is a tough thing to say, what? I wasn't a very nice person. I remember when I was married, I was so particular. My poor husband, God rest his soul. And I was all mad because he would, I don't know, leave his shoes in the floor, and I would just have a fit, an absolute fit. And why? Why? Because I'd rather be right than happy. Because a pair of shoes laying on the floor was that big a deal? Why? What difference did that make in the scheme of life? What difference, and here he was, a good man, went to work every day, loved us, loved his son, and loved our son. And why was I like that? Because I was self-centered, selfish, and spoiled. And I thought the world had to conform to what Martha wanted all the time. And I made many people miserable because of it. That, I think I'm going to start crying now. That is a very, very difficult um, truth to face, that I made other people very miserable because I was so self centered and always wanted to have my way or the highway.
Mhm. But even from that place, though, Miss Martha, you have said that, and now you've evolved. And let me tell you something, because in that segment you said, "I would have rather been right than happy." I'm saying it again because there's people right now that's holding on to right, but they miserable. They holding
Mhm,
on to this idea of right, but everything
mhm.
is falling apart. They holding on to this idea of right, but nobody wants to be around them.
Right.
So if you sitting there and you holding on to this idea of right, you need to do some soul checking. Because one also too in that segment when I started to just think about it, and I love to go back and play these because I'm trying to get like a lot of information out quickly. So a lot of times I miss things because I'm trying to make sure I pull the right things out of these interviews. But another thing with me, I would always kind of come home. But it's also to upbringing, and everything I would want to be in place, Miss Martha. Like, don't leave a dish in there. Don't leave a fork in there.
You and I are twins from separate mothers. I'm the same way.
I'm like, don't leave those clothes in the basket. Don't, and it was just all these little things of kind of like, why? And I started to have a perspective shift actually early. I didn't realize it was happening, but I went to college and I was staying with people that had come from different homes, right? So everything that was okay and law in my house was not law and okay in their homes. So, I remember probably drove my first roommates crazy because I was like, oh no, fold those clothes. And these are all young women. We were, 19, 20. And I'm like, clean them. And I'm like, what is wrong with this? What is wrong with this lady? But it helped me to understand that it's like, why? Why am I mean, I'm not saying, of course, live like a pig or, live like a slob, but at the end of the day, does this even matter? Is it even worth your energy to pull out and to be griping and pointing fingers over those types of things? It doesn't, it doesn't matter, like in the grand scheme of things. And when you start to get a little bit older and have a little bit more experience, you like, you know what? I realized that about 90, look, I used to say 80, but girl, I'm getting a little seasoned now. So I say 90. 90% of this stuff don't even matter.
So true. So true.
So
Right. Because
um,
what are the
I, I, love,
basics? Well,
I love that.
what are the basics? The basics are to be a decent human being. Okay.
Mhm.
You don't always have to pick up every mess. Everything doesn't always have. Now, there's a certain amount of cleanliness and organization that needs to
Absolutely.
happen.
Absolutely.
Of course. But we don't have to always be so compulsive and forcing our children and the people around us like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that and why didn't you that? Then people take us out of their quality world. So like, you know what? I'm not going to hang with that person. They're always criticizing me. They're always giving me trouble. I'm going to find somebody who accepts me.
Absolutely. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot in this season. I tell people these past 3 to 4, maybe up to 5 years have been so transformative for me.
Mm,
It's that core of middle-aged life. And
mm,
it's that core of, centering myself, even as a mother. And, we're going to get into this parenting thing, your expertise here shortly. Recentering myself as a daughter, a granddaughter. It's just really understanding those roles. So it's been a very defining period. And
mm.
part of me just saying, like, okay, Sinead, this is where you are. What, and also with that, my kind of paradigm of what success really means.
Mm,
Oh, Miss Mar, I could almost write a, I need to, I need to sit down and journal really about that. Oh my gosh, when I really had that realization of what success really meant to Shanadra, not to the neighbor, not to the sister, not to the mother, not to the father, but what it meant to Shanadra,
mm.
the weight, Miss Martha, the weight started lifting off. Of I had to do this by a certain age. You have to buy this by a certain age. It just went out the window. So with so many people that sit out here and they watch this podcast, and I said, you know what? And I tell people day one, I said, the first thing you're gonna have to do, I can help you, I can coach you, I can mentor you. I said, but one thing, I don't ever want you to come and say that I want to be just like you. No, you
Mm.
don't. No, you No, you don't. Because if that was the case, you would have never been created to be who you are. We'd have just
Mm-hmm.
been all the same people, all same carbon copies. You don't want to be just like me. There are some things that you can take from me that may help you along your journey. But the first thing I ever heard somebody say that, I have to sit them down and say, you have a lot of work to do. You
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of work to do. And it has nothing to do with, selling anything, or you have a lot of work to do because you have to understand that you want to be everything that you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not like Sinead or anybody else. There's nothing wrong with taking some leadership tips or, some tips to go. It's nothing wrong with that. But going in and saying that you want to be just like a person is almost a telltale sign that you haven't done, a
Right.
good bit, good bit of digging.
And it's kind of silly because you're seeing the results, but you aren't seeing what they went through. You know that old story about everybody put your troubles in the middle of the room and now go pick up somebody else's troubles, and then you look around and you're like, wait a minute, I'm gonna take mine back. Everybody else's troubles are worse than mine. I'm taking mine back. And that's really what's happening is people see the outside. They don't see how did somebody get wise? Well, people don't get wise by just sitting around doing nothing, do they? They go through things, they experience things. Do you want to experience what they had to experience? People get healthy. They get healthy. Why? Usually because they had some sickness and they had to get over it. Do you want to
Sure.
experience that? Now, how about you just learn from them, but you don't need to go through. You don't need to step in their dog poop. We'll just put it that way. You know how you're walking along, so somebody will say, "Hey, don't. There's dog poop there. Don't step in it." What? What dog poop? We all got to step in our own dog poop. But sometimes people can help us so that we don't step in it.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie Forrest Gump. He's running through there, and this guy said, "You just stepped on a big pile of dog crap," and he wiped his face on the shoulder. Okay, all right, we're gonna get back to it. That came in my head when you said that because that's true. And this podcast, I tell people all the time. I've it's transformative for me because, like you said, people come here and they tell me their stuff, and like you said, putting all this stuff in the middle room. Which one are you gonna pick? I have met. This month, I have met true real life warriors on this podcast. You can't tell me anything different. I have met all kinds, faces of trauma, all colors, all shades, lots of different titles. And I tell people all the time when I go out in the world, I don't see the titles. I don't see any of it. I see the heart. I see the journey. I see the mission. And this has done nothing but amplify that in a way that I can't even express to you. Like I know, it's I tell people all the time, you see the branding, you see the nice little cute little video and the pink little scrolling thing, but this is life work and life ministry. And this place has brought me the greatest amount of joy. It tells me that I'm busy, all these different things, but I'm telling you, when I come in here and I meet my guests and I experience them, it takes me away like some little oasis. And I'm like, well, it's probably all hell breaking loose around here, but I'm in here now. So I feel safe and I feel like these conversations really hold the space. I want to go here because I want to highlight all this work that you do around parenting and recovery and kind of behavior because you've done some really great work. I want to start with you saying that behavior is information, not defiance. Oh, when I read that, I said I will not leave that podcast. And I asked her that question specifically because a lot of people never have that light switch to see information, behavior be information. Excuse me. How does that reframe difficult moments in parenting? If you're saying that behavior is information and not defiance, because people are going to see the defiance blaring and not realizing there's actually some cues into what's going on with their child.
Exactly. And all behavior has a goal. There are usually four goals. There's attention, there's power, there's revenge, and then there's a display of inadequacy or helplessness. And so you have to figure out what the goal of the behavior, and it's a repeating behavior usually, or they keep doing the same thing to aggravate you, and you have to figure out what your feeling is in order to figure out, and then what happens when you try to correct the person or the child, and all of that goes together. I have a workbook about that. It's called the mistaken behavior goal workbook, and it helps you figure that out to figure out what the child's mistake or the person's mistaken goal is. But you know, all behavior is information. Let me give you an example. When I was teaching child psychology, I had a student. Her child was 2, and he put his shoes in the microwave and turned it on. And so she came and told me about it. And I said, "Oh my goodness, what did you do?" She goes, "I spanked him." I said, "You spanked him? Why?" "He did something wrong." I said, "How many things has he seen you put in that microwave that have he has no idea that do not look like food?" He was probably just experimenting, and he had no idea he could blow the house up or cause a fire. He's 2 years old. I said, instead of spanking him, how about why don't you talk to him and say, "Oh, we don't do that, honey. That could be dangerous. You can't use a microwave unless mommy's here, unless you ask mommy first or daddy or whoever." I said, he needed more information. So what was his information that behavior was telling her? He loves to experiment. He wants to do things. He wants to learn. But rather than encouraging that, she discouraged him by spanking him, telling him, "Well, you know what? If you try something and I don't think it's good, you're going to get a spanking. You're going to get hit. You're going to get yelled at." Well, what kind of people does that create? Creates fearful people, creates people who are afraid to try new things. And another example is I had a lady at the jail. Okay, now she was in my every week. I give a lecture or an AA meeting, but I usually talk to the women about how to get along with people and things like that. Well, I had one woman in there, and she was just very I think obnoxious would be a word. And it was pretty obvious to me that she's a person who felt that she had to have control all the time. She would talk out of turn. She would just constantly kind of being an interrupter. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to handle this? And I had taught high school, and I can handle things. And the guards would say to me, "If anybody gives you trouble, just tell us. We'll get her out of there." And I thought, you know what? I can handle this. I taught high school. That's no problem. But I thought, how am I going to handle her next meeting? Okay, so I thought about it. She didn't show up the next meeting. 2 weeks later, I was there, and she was out in the hallway. So I said, "Hello, so and so," and I remembered her name. And then I asked her a couple of questions about some of the things that she had commented on, and she was in total shock. Shanedra, total shock. And then she turned to the guard. She goes, "Oh my God, this woman remembered my name. She remembers what I was talking about." And then I realized her goal was, she had a belief, a mistaken belief that she had to have the power. And in order for her to be able to get through her life successfully, she had to be in charge at all times. And that's why she was so obnoxious. Somebody just needed to help her to learn new ways to be in groups, new ways to be with people where she didn't always have to be in control. But you know what? What does that tell me? That tells me that in her upbringing, she felt that if she was, maybe she had to be in control. Maybe if she wasn't, maybe the parents were, or the situation she was in required her to grow up really fast, and she had no other choice but to be in control. I don't know. I don't know what her background was, but I do know that, rather than getting mad at her or shaming her in front of everybody, I had to think there's something going on here, and how can I help her?
Mm, that is good. I think the interesting thing too, I about 2 years ago, it's about a year and a half now, I did some work with some ladies in prison. And it changed my life forever. I'm forever changed for it and forever grateful for it. And a lot of those women, and because you mentioned this, a lot of those women had to grow up really fast. I'm not saying that that's true in her case, as you said, you know her background, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna say of the substance that I spoke to in early 2024, at least 80% of those women had to grow up really, really fast and had to be
Yeah.
placed in some very pressing situations that I don't even know what I would do had I been in those. Because you're like, well, what do you do? Right here, it wasn't even an idea of right or wrong, it was survival. So I know that,
Mhm.
for her and that obnoxious behavior, I'm almost willing to bet a lot of money that it stems for something directly related to a situation to where she had to own it at a very, very young age. But for you to go
Mhm.
in there and break that down, I mean, that speaks to your number one ability to be present, because she probably used a lot of people just dismissing her. Oh, this is obnoxious. She's crazy. I don't want anything to do for her. But for you to go in and bridge that gap and say, hey, I remember this about you, that broke walls that the lady had up probably for years. We don't know. But that level of connection says a lot about you, Martha. So I just want to tell you that I really appreciate that exchange. I want to ask you
Thank you.
this. Yeah, I do. I heard that. And I was like, it really raised my antenna because I remember speaking to some of those ladies. Tell me about accountability and encouragement. How do they coexist without it turning into shame? Because you want to hold them accountable, right? And we want to
Yeah.
give them some encouragement, but sometimes it's a thin line. How do we make those coexist without that becoming shameful?
That's a really good point, and that's something that I go into a lot in my book. Yes, you can raise happy, responsible children, and everything in this book. This book is only 72 pages, and it's all do this, do this, do this, do this, and none of it's theory. It's all stuff I actually used, actually works not only on my own child, on adults, on the people in my classes, on the people in the jail. It's all relationship, and everyone who's read the book, it's rated 5 stars at Amazon, but everyone who's read it has told me it has helped them in their relationships, not only with their children, with their parents, with their siblings, with their people at work. So it's filled with the information that really helped turn my life around because my son was so spoiled at 4. Oh, good Lord. We didn't know what we were going to do because you know why? We were typical parents. We thought that the way you raise a happy child is you never say no. We were wrong. Oh Lord, did we ever have to learn a lot about that? But yes, so we don't want to shame people because oh, I'll give you an example before we even get to that. There was one woman, her child was about a year and a half, and when she would be with him at home alone during the day before dad came home, they would play and have a nice day. But the minute dad came home, the child would sit in the middle of the room and just do nothing. He was afraid to move because the father was abusive, and every time the child did something that the dad didn't like, the child would either get a slap or yelled at. So the child became afraid to move on. Now he was filled with shame about who he was. Everything he did was wrong. And correcting, let me talk about this too. Do not correct at the dinner table. When you're eating, don't correct. Before school, those are times when you're supposed to have, before work, good conversations. Do not correct and shame at the dinner table. And don't ever shame. You can discuss things, don't shame. Discuss them. But when your meals are supposed to be when families together and having a good time and enjoying things and talking about their day, if you need to address behavior, you say, you know what, I'm concerned about such and such. Let's talk tonight at 7 o'clock. Does that work for you? Now, if the child says yes, great. If the child says no, say, what's a good time? If they go never, say, well, unfortunately, we really do have to talk about this, honey. So we have to have a time between, today, tomorrow, whenever. So don't let the child push it off or the person. And when you talk about it, don't talk you this, you that, you never take out the garbage, you blah 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 blah. No, just I feel I'm concerned. And you can also talk about things. Let's say a child doesn't take out the garbage, that's their job. You can have the conversation and say, you know what? When people have to hire somebody to do their work, they get paid for it, don't they? Yes, they do. That's right. So if you don't take out the garbage by 7 o'clock, whatever, Thursday night, and I have to take it out, you're going to pay me $10. And don't even get an okay. It doesn't okay nothing. This is kind of what happens. So I've got a note up for you right by the door to remind you this garbage has to go out. But if it doesn't get out by a certain time, and I wind up taking it out, that's $10 out of your allowance. $10 you have to pay me. However, whatever you want to work it out. But there's no reason for shame. I had a boss one time, and he pointed out I made a mistake, and he pointed it out to me, and I said, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much for showing me that." That was so minute that had you not seen it, I know I never would have, and I don't think anyone else would have. But it still made a difference in the end product. And he was almost shocked that I didn't get defensive. And that's another story. I had a woman in the jail. Her mother, she was in jail, and the mother had her children while she was in jail, and CPS was going to take the children away. Every time the mother called, which was weekly, they talked at least weekly, they would argue because the mother was angry and she would say, you this, you that, you were irresponsible. She would blame her and get her frustration out. And then of course, my friend, she would defend herself. So I said to her, and this comes right out of the book too, I said, you know what? Why don't you just listen to your mother? And why don't you ask her, When she says you're responsible, say, Mom, what exactly did I do that's irresponsible? Get information. You don't have to agree, but don't defend yourself. Get some information. And then you can think to yourself, well, Mom was right about that. Or no, maybe she wasn't right. But maybe there's something I can do that will help our relationship. So when you stop defending herself and just listened and let Mom get it all out, because Mom had a lot of frustration with her. She was raising her 3 children, for heaven's sakes, but she never would allow her mom to have her frustration. So Mom got it out and she was quiet and she said, okay, I understand, Mom, I understand. That's all you got to do. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, thank you for telling me. That's all you got to do. Don't defend yourself. There's nothing to defend. And then you can think it over. What do I need to change? Am I going to change? Is this something I can change? But anyway, because she learned to listen so well, and she and her mother developed a much better relationship while she was in jail. During that time, CPS told her they were not going to take her children away, and when she got out of jail, she was a completely different person and got her children back, and she and her mother had a wonderful relationship. She got a job, and I think she's been out for 2 or 3 years now. She's doing really well.
I love that. I mean, getting the information and then you can cycle through, because I think sometimes you're acting an emotion and not based on information. That's where stuff gets a little bit dicey. Because I tell people my grandparents, they're older, 77 and 81, and at this time it's like you're mothering the grandparents, right, and this, that, the other. So they get very defensive sometimes. They want you to worry about your life. Don't worry about me. They still want their independence, but there's some things you kind of have to, be a little bit more stern. This has to happen. And I tell them all the time, I said, I hope you know that I respect you to the highest, but I still have a job here to do. So I do that. I let them cycle through their emotions and the frustrations and all different things. And I tell them that doesn't negate the fact that at the end of the day, we still have to go to X doctor's appointment. I still have to get this done. I still have something to do at the end of the day. There are going to be things that come about during this day, maybe some frustration, maybe even be some laughs, maybe different things of emotions that we may feel. But at the end of the day, the task at the end of the day still remains. So you're right. I can see how that could be very beneficial in all relationships, not just with children. So thanks for sharing that. I want to ask you one more question before we give you a clean segment for connection points. I was looking at your work and I want to ask you this. So I think it's so important. Tell me what small changes that we can do in the household that can ripple out into the community. Because what people don't understand is the people that they're building in their households, they're going out into the community and having other interactions. So when I think about my relationship with my son, he's 8 years old. I know that he's my son, but my son will also one day be a teammate. He will also maybe work on a project. He may be someone's spouse. He may be someone's father. So those deposits, of course, we're not putting on a fast track, 8 years old to do this. But I'm thinking, like, what are these small changes or things I can put into this household that will ripple into the community? Because that's important to me. Because guess what, Miss Martha, he's not just my son. He's not just and I think a lot of people don't really, I'm like, they're not just your child. They're actually going to, at some point, if God willing, go out into the world and do things. So what do you think your expertise are some small things in the household that we can do to better ripple out into communities?
Well, everyone in the household should have a job. Everyone cleans. Everyone folds clothes. Everyone washes dishes. Everyone takes care of things. 8 is old enough to be doing a lot of chores. Don't do anything for him he can do for himself, because when we do that, we rob people of the learning experience and the feeling of, wow, I did that myself. I can do that. I was told that when I was pregnant. So a man who had a 5-year-old, he said, I'm going to give you some advice. Never do for your child what he can do for himself or she can do for themselves. So that's number one. Tell your child every day you love them and you appreciate them, and that you're glad that they're in your family, and it makes you happy that they're there. Tell them that they're a part of a family, and a family is the basic unit of society, and a happy family creates a happy society, a good society. Just remind him when you see him doing things that you like, when he treats people well, you say, wow, I like the way you did that. I really appreciate how nice you are to people. When you show appreciation, they learn to show appreciation. And then again, when they do something that you don't like, you need to always speak to them in private, not in front of other people, and you need to have a discussion about it, and not just like, oh my goodness, you did that wrong. I have a thing about sharing toys, and I talk about this in the book too. Sometimes, so often we force our children to share their toys. Well, hey, guess what? I don't share my toys. Nobody's driving my car. Nobody's using my computer. I don't share my toys. So when children would come over when Anthony was young, I would say, okay, so and so's coming over. I want you to put away the toys that you don't want them to play with because they're yours. So make sure those are put away, and anything that's left out, we're going to assume that the other child can play with too. Okay. And then I did say, okay. And then he would be agreeable about that. And one time he was playing with someone, and they were playing with little missile things, and it didn't shoot right, this little missile thing. And Anthony, the kid said, "Oh my goodness, Anthony, I think it's busted. I don't know what happened." And Anthony looked at it, he goes, "Oh, let me look." And he realized that it was jammed, and he unjammed it, and he goes, "Here's what happened, blah, blah, blah." Well, later on, I had talked to Anthony. I said, "Wow, I saw how you handled that. That was very mature. A lot of kids would have yelled and screamed, and, oh, you busted my toy, blah, blah, blah. What did you do wrong? No, no, no." But no, you didn't. You really thought it through. And that showed maturity on his part. And 8 is such a wonderful age. My goodness, what is that? Third grade, second, third grade? That is such a wonderful age.
Yeah, he's a third grader. He's we homeschool him, so we get to see his brain tick and all the different things.
Yeah,
We try to
yeah.
immerse him, in parts of school, parts of community, and there's also to some hands-on different things. And it's definitely something. And one of the things I really like about this segment is like he kind of went into that mode of like this toy thing kind of on his own, because just like you said, like he's dinosaur aficionado. So, he knows all of, so, when he gets these ones and he really, really loves Martha, like he's like, I'm not taking this one over there. Or, he wants to kind of put this guy who's, creme de la creme in his eyes over to the side. They can
Yep.
play with these little ones that I have, and he'll kind of share those, but he kind of went into that mode. And I happy you said that because I kind of was on that, you should share too. But also realizing we're like, well, hey, like when you get 16, this kid says, "Now drive your car down the street." You should say, "No, you cannot. I don't share my car." But it's those things and those seeds, because those little moments can transcend later. So I thank you for shifting that and kind of putting that in my, my kind of toolkit there, because naturally he does that. But then I have found myself, it's like, oh, just let her play with it. And he's kind of like, no. And I need to respect those boundaries. I mean, of course, encourage some sharing for sure. But if this is your prized possession and you're not willing to share that, that needs to be okay, because I can go in there and pull out a few things that Shanadra is not willing to share, Miss Martha, and I'm okay with that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good. I wrote that down while you're talking. That's a
Thank
really good advice. I need to keep that nugget plugged in. Now, Miss Martha, I want to make sure I give you a clean segment to tell us where to find the book, all of your connection points, whether that's social media, email, website, whatever you want to have for our guests to connect with you. I want to make sure we have a clean segment for that. So I'll go over to you for that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, the book is at Amazon. And also, if you go to your library, your local bookstore, ask for the book. Yes, you can raise happy, responsible children, and they should have it there for you, and ask your library to please stock it if they don't. Um, and it is, as I said, it is rated 5 stars. You can go to my website, marthaburich.com. Let's say on the website, you can get a free parenting quiz that tells you what style parent you are, and it's self-scored. And you could also go to, let's see, I'm on LinkedIn, Martha Burich, Facebook, Martha Burich Parenting. Goodness, I think I'm all over social media. Instagram, Martha.Burich. Goodness, you know what? Social and YouTube at Martha Burich Parenting. So yes, I'm all over the place. In YouTube, there's lots of videos and things that you can learn from, how to handle people and children. That's pretty
Absolutely.
much me. That's me. And
She's
yeah.
all over the place. And I will be taking that parenting quiz because I'm always trying to figure out, okay, where am I on this whole grand scheme of things, and just really trying to show up and be not a perfect parent, but one that is intentional. And number one, I tell people all the time, the other part about it is like, I never want my child to not know me beyond titles. Mommy did this. No, he needs to know Shanadra as a woman, as a person. So I always
Yeah.
try to make sure that I share, age appropriate, of course, things about us. We go out, have a little bit of lunch, and just have a casual day conversation. Like, son, what really made you feel good today? Or different things like that, because I really want him to know who I am and know that mommy, of course, sometimes has struggles and I manage a lot of different things, but I still choose to show up number one with joy. And I also want to make sure that I show you how to extend yourself grace
Mm.
while you're going through your process. So that's the kind of vibe that I'm on. So I will be taking that quiz. Now, Miss Martha, this is the part of our show where we cue to our guests for final thoughts. We ask them to give us some good parting words for this space and something that really captures the essence of Martha, and it really something just good to leave us on. It's already been 45 minutes. I know it never feels like. I tell my guests, just trust me, we'll have a good time. But I've held their hostage for an extra 15 minutes, and we didn't plan to do that, but it's just been so beautiful. But I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to give us some final thoughts.
You know what? One day at a time. I don't know what you did yesterday, and if you need to make up for it, you figure out a way, but you don't have to do that today. One day at a time. If you do what needs to be done today and the best you can do today, tomorrow's going to take care of itself. So you just try to be the best person you can be today, and tomorrow's going to take care of itself. Everything's going to work out. Have some faith and just do the right thing today. And it really does all work out. Get the information you need and do and learn what you need to learn.
I love that. One day at a time. I'm putting that nugget in here today. I have a tendency to kind of go down this what if this and what if this path. Just Shanadra today. Just do what you can do today. Bring your life, enjoy your energy, and just let this path do its thing. So thank you for that. For everyone that's in the Her Voice Shines podcast, oh my gosh, my first interview for today. I'm just so full of energy. What a great way to kick it off, Martha. Really
It
and
was
truly. Thank
beautiful.
you for your expertise, for your journey, and to the women that are sitting and watching this. And sometimes men creep over here too. I say let your voice shine, okay? Miraculous things happen when you tell your story. Miraculous things happen when you build community. So like the people in church say, I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. And we'll be back in no time with another amazing woman of the Her Voice Shines podcast. We love you.